In this video, we talk about Kinemon and Raizo. Kinemon and Raizo are the only two scabbards that were sent to the future, which is why I grouped these two together. I don't really consider Kanjuro as a scabbard anymore, which is why I said that. Anyway, in my opinion, Kinemon is a lot like Brook. He's basically Sanji, but more reserved, or old school, if you will, which is why I compare him to Brook. He's physically strong, strong-willed, badass, as we've learned recently, and lecherous AF. Raizo, on the other hand, is quite emotional. He's a ninja himself, but he doesn't like talking about ninjas. He gives in to a bit of coercion, like when the crew wanted him to demonstrate his ninja moves. So he's a bit on the weaker side of the will department. He is also insecure about his appearance. I think he's naive like Chopper is in terms of believing that his weirdly obvious disguise would make him unrecognizable. But don't get me wrong, he's caring and warm. And this is exactly what I love about One Piece. You can see pieces of yourself in characters, and there's a lot of things you can apply in real life. I get really inspired about the situations characters overcome to the point that I apply some of these nuggets of wisdom to my own life, which is why I love watching hentai. I mean, One Piece. Anyway, let's dive deeper into these two. We last saw these two with the other scabbards and minks. Getting ready for the fight against Kaido, I think that Raizo was so badass even for just attempting to finish Kaido off instantly, using his two blades in a pincer motion to lop Kaido's head off. Though it was a failed attempt, it was still super badass for him to attempt that. So he really gained respect and admiration from me just because of that one move. He was quick about it too, so that's extra gangster points right there. And Kinemon surprised me when I saw he was able to pierce Kaido's skin. I actually thought that the scabbards were just out to find Kaido and confront him, and after all that dialogue, the fight starts. But this was refreshing. Because aside from not expecting the immediate attack on Kaido, I was surprised that Kinemon successfully pierced Kaido's tough skin. I never would have imagined that he can succeed in doing so. If I made a video about the scabbards earlier than chapter 987, I would be convinced that he and Kiku would not be able to scratch Kaido. I just thought that basing from Punk Hazard and the Dressrosa arc, where Kinemon basically didn't make too big of an impact, and his most notable feats were slashing Vegapunk's dragon, getting toyed by Doflamingo, and countless acts of perversion, that he wouldn't be as strong as Frankie. You know, I think that's a pretty justifiable case, right? Uh, that's where I'm coming from when I was thinking about Kinemon's abilities. Anyway, it was a pleasant surprise, and because of this, I was wondering that if Kinemon was able to pierce Kaido, would he be able to defeat Doflamingo in a one-on-one situation? It's a good question, right? Who can say that if these two fought, that it can't go either way? Or it might even be a one-sided fight in favor of Kinemon. I don't even believe that Doflamingo could deal damage to him, even a small scratch. I mean on Kaido. I just don't think that without Ryuo or maybe even Jinbei's water manipulation in his Fishman Karate, you would be able to do damage to either Kaido or Big Mom. Does this guarantee Kinemon's win against Doflamingo? Maybe not. And most likely, we will never know. But it stopped me for a hot minute there, thinking about that possibility. Anyway, for one-on-one fights, I think that Kinemon fighting with the Tobiropo level characters would be a great thing to see. Personally, I think that he would end up fighting with Sasaki somehow, simply because Sasaki has a fire design on his clothes, which might mean he can manipulate and generate fire. Since Kinemon is able to cut fire, I believe that would be a favorable matchup for Kinemon before he goes back to fight Kaido or maybe even Big Mom. And thinking about it, he might even fight King because of that. And I do expect him to be able to be a good matchup for King and Sasaki. I'd give Kinemon the advantage against Sasaki, but in the fight with King, well, I'd bet on King. Moving on, since Kinemon can do damage to Kaido, I believe that it would be pretty safe to say that he can manage to dish out some damage to Big Mom as well. It might be a worthwhile thing to think about Kinemon teaching Brook how to use Haki and Ryuo because they have a great relationship, and Brook, having tried to stab Big Mom and ultimately failing, might realize that it could be a good idea to have Kinemon or Zoro teach him how to use advanced armament Haki, right? It seems something that Brook could be curious about, having experience in fighting Big Mom himself. I remember the time that he tried to stab Kizaru. He was wondering for himself, how did Rayleigh manage to pierce Kizaru when he tried multiple times, but he couldn't manage to deal a single wound to Kizaru and his Logia ability? So I believe this situation to be similar. This might be another role for Kinemon after the war. And while talking about Kinemon this way makes me believe that he was the strongest out of all of the scabbards. I know this is controversial to say, but the keyword of this statement is was. Now, let me explain why. If he is able to deal damage to Kaido in this state, he only had 3 arcs worth of time to improve his skills. We didn't really see him fight in those arcs, which got me to thinking that he didn't improve all that much. Comparing Kinemon and Raizo to all of the other scabbards, the other 7 could have been doing some training. For Izo's case, he was pirating, taking part in the Marineford War as well as the Payback War. Ashura Doji was leading the Thieves Brigade. Denjiro was the head of the samurai, so that would be arguable if he had to do anything. Kawamatsu was protecting Hiyori before boss Kyoshiro took his place. Then he was imprisoned. He could have been subjected to the work that Luffy was doing in Udon, but because of his violent tendencies and the countless amount of gifters and headliners he took down, he was locked up completely. That's the scenario playing in my head. And finally, we have Poppers and Fluffers, who were in Zou. They could have been training the other minks so they could grow into musketeers and guardians, as well as master their Sulong forms. But for Kinemon and Raizo's case, they were sent straight 20 years into the future. There was almost no time to become stronger. This is basically how strong they both were 20 years ago, which is why I believe that Kinemon could have been the strongest scabbard. We've spent a great deal of time talking about this, and I'm getting sidetracked. Let's talk about roles and importance now. Thinking about Raizo's role and importance in Wano, I think it would be safe to assume that he would be providing more of a backup role in the fight against Kaido. Since he failed in slitting Kaido's throat, it seems that he would do great providing everyone capable of dealing damage to Kaido an opportunity to attack and covering for them as well as going for Jack, number 7, and the any of the fodder near him. As of right now, I think that with his unique ninja abilities and techniques, it makes Raizo one of the best candidates to fight against the Oniwa Banshu. Since Raizo is strong enough to pass as one of Oden's samurai, he should be able to take on members of the Oniwa Banshu. We all saw how this group cornered Robin pretty easily in Orochi's castle, so This could be a tough fight even for strong characters like Raizo. It should be a great fight, whatever the case may be. Next, let's talk about bounty. I think that if these two ever get themselves a bounty placed on their heads, it would be a decent amount. I believe that all of the scabbards would have at least a bounty of around 500 million, and Raizo should be within that range. Maybe even 550 million. For Kinemon's case, I think I'm being biased about him because of being able to do damage to Kaido. But I think he could have a bounty of, I would like to say almost a billion, but I think that's still biased. I believe that a bounty of about 700 million is fair for Kinemon. We have only started to learn about the scabbards and their abilities. Seeing them being able to go toe to toe with Kaido's crew could help fans get a more accurate sense of their power levels, as well as better estimates on their possible bounties, if they ever get one. I just believe that the characters that fight in Wano would not get a bounty if they don't join Luffy's crew. Obviously, that is just my view of how this whole thing could go down, but there are many possible ways that Oda could portray this. Anyway, let's talk about Kinemon and Raizo's chances of joining the Straw Hats. In my opinion, Raizo could be invited by Luffy since he's unique in terms of design. He would be the first crew member to have a weirdly large head. Luffy and the boys would love his ninja skills, but I do believe that Raizo won't join the inner circle. I think that he's going to stay with Momonosuke, protect and groom him to become a better leader. Same goes for Kinemon actually. I believe that's the best role for Kinemon and Raizo. He has been with Momonosuke ever since the time travel, and I think that he would continue to do that for the rest of his days. I know I keep saying that all the scabbards are going to join the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, but when the time comes, I think that Momonosuke would still be too young to be left alone without any protection. So someone has to stay with him when the Straw Hats need some help fighting with the final boss of the whole story. Kinemon really fits that role because of his dedication. He has already been doing it ever since we were introduced to him. On the other side of the coin, though, the argument that I could give that either of these two has a good chance of joining is that they both have great relationships with the Straw Hats. They both have great respect for Luffy, and they both use two swords slash blades because that could complete the swordsman trio with Brook using one sword, Kinemon and Raizo using two, and Santoryu by Zoro. That sounds like a great designer brand, Santorio by Zoro. Anyway, this wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Crush like if you did, as if you were Kinemon crushing Robin's outfit. Comment down below who you think the strongest scabbard is and why. Now, if you love One Piece, subscribe to the channel so it could grow. Hit the notifications button because on the next video, we are finally talking about Luffy. Stay safe now. Peace!